Good evening.
Good evening, Cap.
Thank you for joining us once again. Now, as Thaksin is still holding a conviction of 2-year jail term here in Thailand, does this mean that Japan is going against its own law by providing a special treatment to Thaksin to enter Japan?
Well, as the reporter has correctly pointed out, there is domestic legislation on the Japanese part which forbids the Japanese government from permitting Mr. Thaksin from entering Japan since he's a convict of jail sentence for 2 years. However, if you look at that particular legislation, there is an exception. There is Article 5-2 of that legislation, which provides that the Japanese government can provide a special exception to that rule. So technically, it is an exception to provide Mr. Thaksin with a special permit to enter Japan. And if we look at the latest reports from the Japanese media, for example, the Kyodo News Agency, they reported the interview or the press conference given by the chief Secretary General of the Japanese cabinet, saying that they take into account not only the interests of Mr. Thaksin alone in visiting Japan, but also the interest of the bilateral relations between Thailand and Japan, and this is following the request from the Thai government. So it is quite interesting that the Japanese government is actually taking into account the benefits or the interests between Thailand and Japan, and not only Mr. Thaksin.
Now, from your opinion, on what grounds did the Japanese government grant him this special exception for this, visa entry? In your opinion, what grounds, though?
So there is a specific legislation under Japanese law. It's Article 5-2 of the Japanese immigration law, which provides that if there is a appropriate circumstance, that the government may provide this special entry. And so that is a domestic law on Japanese part. And when we consider the law on the Thai part, the Thai legislation, we do not have the power or the jurisdiction to control the decision by the Japanese government. So that's nothing that we can talk about, really. And when we think about the international law, international rules governing relations between states, there is no specific rule prohibiting a particular government from granting visa to another national from another country who's facing a jail sentence. There is no such rule. There is, however, a general rule of human rights law, which Thailand and Japan are both parties to this treaty. It's called the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Article 12 of that particular law states that Mr. Thaksin, as well as any human person, should enjoy the right to freedom of movement within a particular country, provided that he enters that country lawfully. So in this case, if the Japanese government lawfully grants him the visa, special visa under Article 5-2 of its own immigration law, then international law actually supports the freedom of traveling of Mr. Thaksin in this case, and there is very little that Thailand can do about it, because remember, we are talking about the jurisdiction of the Japanese government. There's not much that the Thai government can do in this case.
Well, Kun Virapat, in practice, Thai authorities are required to arrest Kun Thaksin, who jumped bail, but right now it seems like they are trying to facilitate his return. Isn't that contradictory or against the law?
That is actually a very interesting point. We have conflicting reports. If we think about the reports from the past 3 days, high-level officials of the Thai government, the new administration, denies any involvement in this issuance of the visa. But if you look at the latest reports by AFP, Agence France-Presse, or the Kyodo Japanese News Agency, just released a couple of hours ago, the news reports actually say that the Chief Secretary General of the Japanese cabinet actually refers to the request by the Thai government that the Thai government takes the position not to forbid Mr. Thaksin from traveling to any particular country. So we have to look into this issue, whether that would make the attempt to capture Mr. Thaksin more difficult. If it is so the case that it is more difficult to capture Mr. Thaksin because the Thai government actually allows him to travel around the world, and there might be possible grounds for the Thai authorities to consider whether those Thai officials are actually making it more difficult for the police to capture Mr. Thaksin. But on the other hand, if the Thai government is simply saying that we do not have the authority nor the policy to stop any particular government from issuing visas to a Thai national, then it goes back to the same original question, and that is, this is the matter under the jurisdiction of the Japanese government, the Japanese law, and international law does not forbid the Japanese government to issue such visa. On the other hand, international law actually promotes or supports the freedom of movement of Mr. Thaksin. Now, if I may jump to a related issue which may be of interest in the next few days, if not weeks, that is concerning the extradition attempts by the Thai authorities, whether it is possible for Thailand to request Japan to extradite or to send Mr. Thaksin back to Thailand once he enters Japan. Now, this is an interesting issue. First of all, we have to make it very clear that at present, at this moment in time, there is no extradition treaty between Thailand and Japan. So there is no specific agreement, there is no international law agreements governing the extradition between Thailand and Japan. If we remember a couple of years ago, back in 2008 or 2009 in Phuket, Thailand and Japan actually signed another treaty, and that treaty concerns not extradition but the handing over of convicted persons, which means that if Mr. Thaksin is convicted to jail sentence under Japanese law, then the Thai government may request the Japanese government to send Mr. Thaksin back to live his jail term in Thailand. But this is not the case in Mr. Thaksin. Mr. Thaksin did not violate Japanese law per se. Mr. Thaksin was convicted of violating Thai legislation concerning the counter-corruption, and therefore this particular treaty signed a few years ago does not concern the extradition. The question then becomes, what happens if we do not have extradition treaty between Thailand and Japan? The question becomes tricky because it relies on domestic law of each country, and that is Thai law and Japanese law, and also what we call diplomatic channel. If we look at the Thai law in the first place, this is the first tricky point because the Thai law states that the Extradition Act of BE 2551 actually says that the person who has the authority to send the request to Japan is actually the Attorney General of Thailand. But the law also says that the cabinet, the Thai cabinet, in other words, Kun Yingluck and the ministers can actually veto the decision. The cabinet can have the final say whether Thailand should send the request to Japan or not. So that is the first problem that we have to face within our own country, within the Thai legislation. If that request is actually sent to Japan, then it becomes a matter under Japanese law, which I'm not an expert on Japanese law, but I've looked briefly at the Japanese extradition law. It actually provides the Japanese Minister of Justice a very wide discretion whether to provide assistance to Thailand or not. So if the Minister of Justice of Japan actually considers that it is not appropriate in his own view, to extradite Mr. Thaksin, then the Japanese government has no obligation to extradite Mr. Thaksin. And there are other exceptions to the rule as well, which make this case quite difficult for Thailand to actually get Mr. Thaksin extradited back.
Right. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate you joining our program once again, Kun Viraphat Pariyawong. Thank you.